Disability is often viewed as a problem in society. But what is disability, and how can we solve the problem? The social model of disability helps us to answer these questions by looking at them in a different way. The traditional view of disability assumed that people with perceived impairments would be unable to perform many of the activities and social roles that other people normally do in society, like succeeding in education, employment, in bringing up a family, or in public life. From this perspective, disability in everyday life is often viewed as a problem for individuals caused by their impairment. For example, not succeeding in school might be seen as a problem caused by a person's blindness, deafness, or dyslexia. The solution to this kind of problem was often to treat the person through medicine and rehabilitation, or to compensate them for their assumed limitations by arranging less valued social roles for them, such as sheltered employment or residential care. We can call this an individual model of disability. The person has the problem, so the person has to change. The social model of disability challenges this view and turns it around. From a social model perspective, the problem of disability is not caused by limitations in the person, but by limitations in their environment. For example, a failure to succeed at school might be due to the use of teaching materials that are not easily accessible to people with sensory or cognitive impairments. It might be due to a school routine that is not easy to manage for people with autism, or to school buildings that are not easily accessible to people with mobility impairments. From the perspective of a social model of disability, it is society that has the problem and society that needs to change. Using this model leads us to examine disability in new ways, looking at it as a social problem caused by social structures, social relationships, and social processes. This way of thinking about disability was inspired by the experiences of disabled people and their campaigns to be more included in society. For example, as one group of disability activists concluded, "In our view, it is society which disables. Disability is something imposed on top of our impairments, by the way we are unnecessarily isolated and excluded from full participation in society. Disabled people are therefore an oppressed group in society." There are 4 key points here. 1. Disability and impairment are 2 separate things. 2. Disability is about exclusion from full participation in society. 3. This exclusion is not inevitable because we could imagine a more inclusive society in which people with impairments were not disabled. 4. Because of this exclusion, it makes sense to think about disabled people as an oppressed group in society. Both impairment and disability are part of people's lives and experiences, but the social model focuses our attention on disability. In this way, the problem of disability becomes rather like the problem of racism or the problem of gender equality. It has social causes and social solutions. We can imagine a different way of doing things that would reduce the problem in society. For example, by making our culture more inclusive of diversity, or making our physical environment more accessible to a wider range of people. Disability in this sense is the loss or limitation of opportunities to take part in the normal life of the community on an equal level with others due to physical and social barriers. For the purposes of academic study and research, the social model approach helps us to focus our attention on the study of disabling barriers in society and devising solutions to them. Using a social model of disability helps us to identify what these barriers are and how to remove them. In the words of Mike Oliver, disability, according to the social model, is all the things that impose restrictions on disabled people, ranging from individual prejudice to institutional discrimination, from inaccessible buildings to unusable transport systems, from segregated education to excluding work arrangements, and so on. Further, the consequences of this failure do not simply and randomly fall on individuals, but systematically upon disabled people as a group who experience this failure as discrimination institutionalized throughout society. To summarize, from a social model perspective, the problems associated with disability are not caused by individuals, but by a society that fails to take full account of their needs. To understand this, we need to distinguish between people with impairments and disabling barriers. This includes the barriers faced by people with any kind of impairment, whether that is physical, intellectual, or psycho-emotional. Disabling barriers can be physical or social. They may be environmental, organizational, or cultural. Removing such barriers requires changes to law and policy, to professional practice, to the built environment, to public attitudes, to workplaces, schools, and colleges. It has wider implications for the way we organize society and how we relate to each other as people. How does the social model of disability help you think differently about the world? How could you use it to help create a more enabling society?